Welcome to the Language Lab podcast, where we explore the nuances of English and help you navigate its complexities. Today, we're diving into a topic that many of us encounter daily: common English mistakes and how to avoid them. English can be tricky, and even native speakers can stumble over certain phrases or grammatical structures. We'll discuss some of these common pitfalls, share tips on how to avoid them, and sprinkle in a bit of humor along the way.
Let's start with one of the most frequent mistakes: subject-verb agreement. This is something that can trip up anyone, regardless of their level of proficiency. For instance, many people say, "The group of students are going to the museum," when they should say, "The group of students is going to the museum." The word group is singular, so the verb should also be singular. A quick tip to avoid this mistake is to identify the subject of the sentence and ensure your verb agrees with it, not with the plural noun that follows it.
Next on our list is the misuse of pronouns. This is particularly common when people mix up he, she, and they. For example, someone might say, "Everyone should do their best, and he should submit his work on time." While this might sound fine in casual conversation, it can lead to confusion about the gender of the subject. A better way to phrase this would be, "Everyone should do their best, and they should submit their work on time." This way, you're using a gender-neutral pronoun that applies to everyone, which is considerate and inclusive.
Another common mistake occurs with the use of less and fewer. This one can be quite sneaky. People often say, "There were less people at the concert," when they should say, "There were fewer people at the concert." The rule here is simple: use fewer for countable nouns, like people or apples, and less for uncountable nouns, like water or money. To help you remember, think about whether you can count the items in question. If you can, use fewer.
Now, let's talk about the infamous there, and there. These three words sound the same but have very different meanings, and mixing them up can lead to confusion. There indicates possession, as in their car is red. There refers to a place, as in the book is over there. Finally, there is a contraction of they are, as in they're going to the movies. A good strategy to avoid this mistake is to practice using each word in a sentence, which can help reinforce their meanings.
Moving on, we have the confusion between your and your. This is another common mix-up that can lead to some embarrassing moments. Your indicates possession, as in "Is this your book?" while your is a contraction for "you are," as in "You're going to love this." A helpful tip is to replace the word with "you are" in your sentence. If it makes sense, then you should use your. If not, stick with your.
Let's not forget about the dangling participle, which is a classic grammatical mistake. This occurs when a participial phrase is not clearly attached to the noun it modifies. For instance, walking down the street. "The flowers were beautiful" implies that the flowers were walking down the street, which is quite a sight. A better construction would be, "Walking down the street, I noticed the beautiful flowers." This way, it's clear who is doing the walking. To avoid dangling participles, always make sure that your introductory phrases clearly refer to the subject of your sentence.
Another area where people often slip up is in the use of who versus whom. This distinction can be confusing, but here's a simple rule: use who when referring to the subject of a clause and whom when referring to the object. For example, "Who is going to the party?" Subject versus "Whom did you invite to the party?" Object. If you're ever in doubt, you can rephrase the sentence using he or him. If he fits, use who. If him fits, use whom.
Next, let's talk about the use of double negatives, which can be a source of confusion. In standard English, double negatives are frowned upon because they can create a positive meaning. For example, saying "I don't need no help" actually implies that you do need help. Instead, you should say, "I don't need any help." To avoid this mistake, remember that using one negative word is usually sufficient to convey your meaning.
As we continue, we can't ignore the importance of proper punctuation. Commas, in particular, often cause frustration. One common mistake is the comma splice, which occurs when two independent clauses are joined by just a comma. For example, "I went to the store, I bought milk," is incorrect. You can fix this by using a coordinating conjunction, adding a semicolon, or separating them into two sentences: "I went to the store, and I bought milk," or "I went to the store, I bought milk." A good practice is to read your sentences out loud. If you find yourself pausing, that's often a sign that a comma might be needed.
Now, let's touch on the use of like and as. Many people use like in formal contexts when as would be more appropriate. For instance, instead of saying, "I work like a teacher," It's more correct to say, I work as a teacher. To avoid this mistake, remember that like is used for comparisons, while as is used to describe a role or function.
Finally, let's address the issue of vocabulary. Many English learners and even native speakers sometimes misuse words that sound similar but have different meanings, like affect and effect. Affect is usually a verb meaning to influence something, while effect is a noun referring to the result of a change. A great way to avoid confusion is to practice using these words in sentences, reinforcing their meanings through context.
As we wrap up, remember that everyone makes mistakes, and the key is to learn from them. Language is a living, breathing entity that evolves over time, and as we engage with it, we become better communicators. By being aware of these common pitfalls and practicing the tips we've discussed, you'll be well on your way to mastering English. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Language Lab podcast. Keep practicing, stay curious, and until next time, happy learning!